Done. There we go. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Good to be back. Nice to be here. Always good to be seen. Not a big scene guy. Everybody's like, let's go here. It's a place to be seen. I'm not a big scene guy. I'm like, I'd rather people not see me. I'd rather kind of come in the back door, experience life, and then leave out the back door. That's kind of how I am. But anyway, it's nice to be seen by you, which means I'm here, which means we're all alive. Appreciate everybody being involved today. Lots of stuff to get to. We're going to get to Jamie Salé, who's increasingly losing her marbles, which is a lot of fun. We're going to talk about mainstream media in this country, which has abdicated their responsibility to you as an individual and has been happening over time. And we're also going to talk about books, because books are important. And our guest today has written several of them. In fact, about 13. You can get 8 of them on Amazon. And his latest is just a banger. And it's like incredible because it's a piece of history that's super relevant today, Rye. And he's one of my favorite guests. He also happens to have his doctorate. He also happens to have his master's. When we bring people in to critique things, talk about things, we don't bring in lumps. We don't bring in losers from True North. We don't go and find jack-offs around the world and go, this jack-off can talk about anything. No. We go to the source and we find people that write the law, that write how this works, that have definitive degrees, that have the ability to kind of marshal you through these conversations. Yeah. Please welcome to the program, not only Ryan Lilley.
Oh, wait, I thought that was my resume you were rhyming off.
No, not at all. Not only Ryan Lilley, it's not Ron. You got to change your handle there. Ron Lilley.
Didn't put Ron.
At Ryan Lilley. Someone else did, Ron.
Someone's in there mucking around.
From the Lens Report. Thanks, he joins us here at DeanBlundell.com, the Dean Blundell Show, brought to you by our friends at Kivlaw.ca. But as well, we go to the Ottawa Valley. Please welcome back to the program. He's a lawyer and he's an author. He's got a new book out. It is called Big Men Fear Me, and it is a look at the fast life and quick death of Canada's most powerful media mogul. Please welcome back to the program, my friend and yours, Mr. Mark Bourrie, ladies and gentlemen. How do you like that?
Bourrie.
How do you like that?
Some poor Ron Lilley in Australia is having abuse heaped all over him right now.
I'm not on that show.
Yeah. Oh, you know it was Rookie.
It's not me.
He jumps
that
in and
guy's
he's
a
like,
fuck.
He's always changing people's names, so I'm happy that Mark Bourrie is just Mark Bourrie because I didn't want to piss you off.
There's a driving instructor in Ireland named Warren Kinsella, and this poor guy gets so much shit on Twitter.
Well, it was like me with Ryan Lilley, the quarterback for Arizona Cardinals. I used to get his hate mail all the time. He ended up sending me a pair of his rookie cleats and his rookie card signed. Because I used to just toy with the haters, right? He'd be like, "Oh, sorry, I was coked out last night. I didn't know what I was doing. I was too drunk. I was, and he loved it. And his PR people said, "Listen, Ryan loves what you're doing with the people that hate him. Can we send you something?" And they sent me a bunch of free stuff. So Warren in Ireland or whatever should reach out to Kinsella and get one of his paintings or something.
Yeah,
he should.
You know what? I laugh at Mark.
Put a piece of canvas on the wall. Take a cat, dip it in paint, and like whip it up the wall a few times. Give the guy some real art.
I didn't think we'd get into the sewering in minute 4, but why not? I mean,
PhD author and art critic Mark Bourrie joins us today, folks.
Well, he is, dude. This is why I love having Mark on. You can't fuck with the guy. Like he's got his doctorate in Canadian media history. Like there's the most educated Canadian media guy on the planet. So we're going to talk about media people, and we just started talking about Warren Kinsella, like right like that. As soon as he got here, you couldn't help it, eh, Mark? It's like,
sorry, Warren.
Do you have a strong revenge bone in your body? Is that the deal?
I love the weird.
Yeah, I know you do. Anyway, so grateful that you're here, bud. I want to talk about this book, Big Men Fear Me, before we get going. This is your the 8th title you have on Amazon. It is up on Amazon right now. Here you go, folks. Big Men Fear Me paperback. You can get it on Kindle, or you can get a paperback version of it. Strong. There's already a used one, and it just came out, which is unbelievable. Someone just ripped through it. Yeah,
$62. They want 62. Yeah, I'll sell them a used one for $45. Yeah, I'll throw in a piece of the True Cross too while we're at it. So.
You should, dude. That's what everybody does. They offer, like, for an extra $10, I'll sign it for you. It's just a cheap way to make a little extra money. But this is a fucking great book. Like, I've read about 6 reviews, which you've been kind enough to share. Follow Mark at Mark Bourrie on Twitter. This is a fucking great book. I just ordered it myself. I'm a big supporter of my friends and their work, like Too Dumb for Democracy, Moskrop. You wrote the foreword for that as well. This is a story about the founder of the Globe and Mail. Yeah. And he was kind of prescient when it comes to the time that we're in right now, which I found fascinating. And no one has written about this guy. The write-up on Amazon's incredible. It is a true story. George McCullagh is his name. He bought the Globe and Mail and the Empire, merged them into the Globe and Mail. Charismatic 31-year-old high school dropout, already made millions in the stock market. He was the beginning of a meteoric rise of a man wildly expected to be one day the Prime Minister of Canada. The charismatic McCullagh had a dark side dogged by bipolar disorder, destroyed his political ambitions, eventually killed him. He was all but written out of history. It was a loss so significant that journalist Robert Fulford called his story one of the great unwritten books in Canadian history until now. In Big Men Fear Me, award-winning historian Mark Bourrie, who joins us, tells the remarkable story of McCullagh's inspirational rise, devastating fall, and with it sheds new light on the resurgence of populist politics, challenges to collective action, and attacks on the free press that characterize this tumultuous area. This is what I'm talking about, is that, when you told me you were writing this last year, Mark, I'm like, well, dude, this is what we're going through right now. Is it not? Like, is that not his story, the fascism and the press and all the other shit?
Yeah, one thing is this whole idea of fascism in the press and using and starting a right-wing populist movement to take over the government, which is what he did. But the other thing was that he was into new media, and the new media back then was radio. And so his career arc starts with radio taking off, and it's not connected particularly to that, and ends oddly when he is being buried. There's great big stories in the paper. Mobs of people turned out, like the street was jammed with people for his funeral. That was the overflow at St. James Cathedral in Toronto. And in the little corner of the Toronto Star front page reporting on the funeral is a blurb that Channel 9, the CTV channel in Toronto, is about to go on the air soon. And to me, that's a real kicker, because if he'd done television, I think he'd been really good at it, frankly. And he was only 47 years old, good-looking guy, good voice, kept himself in good shape, all that sort of stuff. So he harnesses new media, and he harnesses populism at a time when everybody's trying to find answers to very complicated economic and political questions, like the Great Depression and the rise of fascism in Europe. So when I started working on the book, the rise of fascism, new media was sort of a theme of the work I was doing, but the whole rise of fascism thing wasn't really taking off when because it took me a long time to do this book. And then, holy cow, it's like there was that line somebody had about history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the case here, is that it really does, where the boundaries of journalism are being erased. And you see that with things like True North, with the Sun chain, where you have basically the Toronto Sun. Well, all the Sun papers now are just PR for the Conservative Party of Ontario and the Conservative Party of Canada. And, they don't even try to pretend they're not. These we're seeing the sort of end of objective media, which is actually a very small stretch of the history of media, and the return of these party organs. And they're not even interesting organs, like the kind of organs you can sort of play with and have fun with. They're more like a withered organ that you really can't do much with or want to. And people are cluing into this, right? But back then, a guy like McCullagh could run the Globe and Mail and the Toronto Telegram. He owned that too, and just basically owned the premier. He literally owned 2 premiers of Ontario. He could walk in and tell Premier Mitchell Hepburn, "This is a fucking bizarre case on his own. And his buddy George Drew just fire cabinet ministers, and they do it. You know, he could get laws passed anytime he wanted. He got a law passed to screw the Toronto Star out of being left to a charitable foundation, which is the thing that actually sets up the whole situation where you can't have a business owning a charity owning a business in Ontario. I thought that was really ironic as I was working on it.
So Big Men Fear Me is the name of the book, but George McCullagh, who's the founder of the Globe and Mail, and in the book, you really kind of tie in, I haven't gotten it yet, I just ordered it, but my understanding is as you're talking about it, you're tying in, kind of the death of objective media back in his time, which is what, in 1931, 1930? That's when he rose to...
He bought the Globe and the Mail and Empire in 36. He was 31 at the time.
Right.
So he's just a kid all through this thing. His career arc is 16 years from 36 to 52. So he's very, very young. He's probably younger than the two of us, but not quite as young as Mr. Lilley.
Yeah, that's right, baby.
So he's dead. He's dead at 47. And
okay.
So it's during the Great Depression. These are papers of incredible power. It's something that maybe is kind of lost on young people today, how much power a newspaper had.
Right back then, because and I say this to people all the time. We talk about, how little radio matters, how little traditional print matters, little television matters now. The downfall of traditional media that we've seen really authored over the past 10 years. People don't understand how important radio hosts were 15 years ago. Nonetheless, fucking 50 years ago. Yeah. Television hosts 50 years ago. And back before television and radio, or when radio was this burgeoning new media, the only place you got news on a regular basis was from a newspaper. Talk about monopoly. Anything that you read came through that super tight funnel that came out the other end of that garden hose, and anybody who was reading it just assumed it was news, right? That's the law of the land. When you read it in the newspaper, sort of how when we grew up, and I'd love your thoughts on this, this is the first that I can remember in our history, because what we're doing is it's revisionist. I'm looking at what's going on today with the National Post media companies, including Sun, the True Norths and the fucking little gobblers like Rebel News. And I'm like, listen, we're still operating under that premise that those traditional sources are the law when it comes to information. But this was our first, not really our first, I guess, maybe it would be in traditional media in Canada. You're saying George McCullagh back in Big Men Fear Me, as you kind of have laid out. This is the start of that in Canada, the obfuscation of, what's the truth, what isn't, the owning of and the monopoly of information as it's given to people, correct?
Yeah, when he starts his populist movement, he called it the Leadership League, and it ran for about 4 months in early 1939, and the war comes and stuff, and things happen to him. Anyway, he just put his whole staff to work doing full pages of Leadership League stories. So these were opinion pieces, stories digging up sort of small scale stupid things that are happening in Ottawa. And each page, every time they do one, has coupons to send to the House of Commons to a person's MP, and of course one to the Globe and Mail so they can data scrape. And they sent so many. There were so many people all across Canada, because Toronto's not even a city of 1 million people at this point, but paper goes everywhere, every day. Mm-hmm. They sent so many of these little coupons that overwhelms the post office and the Parliament building for weeks, and scares the hell out of the Prime Minister of Canada. Now, if the Globe and Mail are, I'm not going to crap on the Globe and Mail. Globe and Mail's been good to me with this book, or the Toronto Star. If any newspaper in Canada decided to launch a program to change the way government works in Canada, first of all, nobody cared. And second of all, it sure as hell wouldn't scare the Prime Minister of Canada the way this thing did. And nobody, who can name the publisher of the Globe and Mail, let alone want to go to Maple Leaf Gardens and hear him speak the way 10,000 people did in March of 1939?
What was he selling? Was he openly selling fascism? Is that what George McCullagh was doing? What was his goal? Was it the theocratic fascist empire? Was he looking over at Hitler in Germany going, you know what, that looks actually pretty good because I hold all the keys and the cards here?
What he wanted was something that was very Canadian. So there wasn't any Jew hatred. There wasn't any talk of race stuff. He wasn't. They did want a stronger military, but people on the right always do. What he wanted, the two big things: get rid of the provincial governments. That was going to happen, and have the political parties, which Liberals and Conservatives in Ottawa, merge into a coalition government. Those are the two big things, and then they were going to cut taxes and make government more efficient, all that shit, right? But the two core ideas were, the merger of parties, which he'd actually pulled off in Ontario to a point. It almost happened. He had a deal between the Ontario Conservatives and the Liberals to form a coalition government. And I think that's why coalitions in Canada still have this bad name, and people don't even remember why. Was because of this anti-democratic move by McCullagh. And it didn't matter that the political parties weren't interested in merging. He was going to get the people to force them to have what he called a national government or national unity government. But really what it would be is a country run by smart, young, attractive, wired-in people like George McCullagh, right? So it was government by experts, government by rich people, low taxes, and no public say in anything.
Yeah, a kleptocracy or a fascist kleptocracy, right? That's what you're talking about. It's like all the power is in the hands of the young, smart people and the people that already own the keys to the kingdom, and everybody else has got to fucking put up with it. It's like it's what it was. So did he just pick the wrong side, or was he just part of, like, did he catch on to a movement? And what was his deal? Like, I mean, the dude died, and I don't want to give away the book because you got to go read the book. But and I'm very excited to read it because of the parallels to today, which we'll get to in just a second. But what was his downfall? I mean, if he was that powerful in that time, was it television? Was it radio? Was it competing opinions? Was it his? I know he was bipolar. Was it his mental and emotional unwellness? Like, what was it?
It wasn't radio, because he was on the radio all the time, and he was also connected to a lot of these big radio populists in the States, like Father Coughlin. So radio was sort of a tool in his kit, not something that he competed against per se. What you could do back in the day was you could buy an hour on the national CBC network anytime. If you had the money, you just bought an hour CBC. There you go, and he would do it and have these long speeches, and it would feed into his own fame and the Leadership League stuff and that sort of thing. What it was, a couple things. One was the fact that he was bipolar. I think the thing that really killed him, and I think the thing that's going to kill populism, and I hope people make the connection when they read the book, is that the easy answers that he tries to offer are answers that people go, no, that won't work, or that's not enough. So when you tell everybody that the whole system is corrupt and weird and it doesn't do anything for the people, and it's Ottawa is just a joke of a town, and then you just say, well, we'll just get rid of elections. That people are not as stupid as a lot of politicians and a lot of the populist crowd think, and not as stupid as a lot of the media people think. And while public opinion can kind of slosh around like water in a tub, it eventually does find a sort of sensible ground. And anybody who wants to read something that's sort of in sync with my views on it should go and dig out Plain Speaking, which is Merle Miller's oral history of Harry Truman. Because Harry Truman, I think, had such a good grasp on how public opinion worked. And even people like H.L. Mencken writing on the right saying, well, you've got all these, the voters aren't that clever, but the politicians, aren't that good at selling soap to these people. And eventually it does get all calculated out. And that's what happened to McCullagh was when he got everybody together and he had everybody reading, they all could talk about the problem, but they can never find the answer, or an answer that worked, or an answer that made sense. So if you look at someone who's like that chowderhead that they just made Premier of Alberta, Smith, and when she's not apologizing, she's got these moronic ideas. Now, her apologies are amazing, and I'm just going to start papering the walls of some room with them.
Dude, did you see the last one? Her whole week. So this you're talking about the Premier of Daniel Smith, Premier of Alberta, who ascended to power because Jason Kenney got walked out, and then they're like, let's elect the craziest bastard we can find. Let's go and find someone who believes in all the anti-vax tropes. Let's go find someone who's got a history littered with anti-democratic, pro-Russian, pro-kleptocracy, pro-authoritarianism, someone who doesn't believe in doctors, science, or common sense, and let's make her the premier. That's so last week. Yeah. Last week.
What could go wrong?
Well, everything, which is awesome, right? Like, I've never seen this before in my life, where every day she starts off with an apology about something that she said like 6 months ago. Today's was like the Ukraine stuff that she said the other day, where she's like, listen, I wouldn't want nukes next to me. This one right here. Today, I'm reaffirming my condemnation of Russian invasion of Ukraine and offering my full apology for past comments. I mean, this is every day, dude. This person every single day is apologizing for something she said that is not just wildly unpopular, historically completely inaccurate, and totally fucking irresponsible.
And I think what's so one of her advisors, who are probably about as bright as a 20-watt bulb, but they're fuck tons brighter than her, pulled her aside and said, "You know why you can get so many good pierogies in Alberta? You might want to start rethinking this whole like Ukrainians are better off dead thing, right?"
They say it's around 10% of the Alberta population has Ukraine ties. So
so
direct,
and then lots of people have friends and husbands and wives who are So I mean, we have this race. It's like something in some sort of old, like that you would read about in a Dickensian book, where they would run like, say, retarded dwarfs through a town and bet on them. You have her and Liz Truss, who could be like the stupidest of the pair, who could get out the most ridiculous, apology. And old Liz now, she's starting to bleed ministers, but I think Smith is maybe a week behind on that. It's just like you can't, stupid is. Stupid just doesn't work, and eventually people do. I'm not saying that we should go out and elect the smartest people that we can find, because a lot of smart people are pretty fucked up, including the guy who wrote that book about. But when you go out and you just decide to troll the truck stops of the West to find like the dumbest person sitting in the corner muttering, and decide that they'd make a really good premier, just because she was cute at one point, and it's like, for fuck's sakes. When Doug Ford starts to look like a statesman,
we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny, the parallels though, right? The parallels between like you say, you're making those
once good looking.
You're making those comparisons. Like Boris Johnson was like Jason Kenney.
Yeah.
And now Liz Truss is Daniel. And it's funny how they're falling upwards. They're falling up an escalator.
But hold it. This is the one thing I would say too, because like where it ties into the book, and the reason why I wanted to have you on is the parallels to what we're going through today are fucking remarkable, from what I understand from all the write-ups and reviews of Big Men Fear Me. Mark Bourrie, who's the author, you can get it on Amazon anytime. This is the name of the book. It's about George McCullagh, the founder of the Globe and Mail, who literally was a fascist who tried to bend the will of the people and bend the law towards himself through the cornering and the disruption of media, right? Through the idea that he's going to be able to harness populism, he's going to tell people what's good for them, and we see that all the time, Mark. Like, and that's what I would ask you is, when you look at let's take the Toronto Sun, let's take Brian Lilley for an example, one of our favorite people. I happen to think he's the biggest piece of shit on the planet.
I used to work with that guy. If someone should just grab him by the heels and shake some fucking organ into his brain, into his head, so that he has something in there. Like, that is. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
well, just like, and let's work through it. Like, I mean, as a case study, let's look at. I have written a couple things about him. Yeah, it's hard to qualify how much Fraser Sun reporter Brian Lilley is. This thing has had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views, which is why I'm really excited about showing this to you today. Now, Brian Lilley, let's talk about him becoming one of the Sun's op-ed guys, right? Like a guy who is like, this is the news of the day. This is what is really going on. This is how people kind of have acted and reacted to newspapers. These guys, as you pointed out, the Toronto Sun is nothing more than a lobby agency for the Conservative Party of Canada and the Conservative Party in this province. That's it. Brian Lilley is not a journalist. If I'm not mistaken, he was like a bit-playing failed radio host in Ottawa that was hired, never really wrote before, was hired to be a journalist to regurgitate populist bullshit for people, right? Isn't that kind of the same thing?
Yeah, he's a guy out of Mohawk College who was doing hits for CJAD and CFRB back in the day. I worked in the press gallery with him. I was literally, a few feet away from him, listening to his like inane horseshit that he would come up with through the workday. He was really big into family values until he split his family and valued somebody else. An annoying, hypocritical wretch who was hired by the Sun, like you said, because he was a neutral agar, a medium through which the Conservative Party of Ontario could basically place its stuff in the paper. But the Toronto Sun is an inconsequential paper now. It's nobody could possibly take it seriously, and all it does is reinforce the anger and evil of its own readership. But but in a way, that's the way papers were in the 30s. And to bring it back to McCullagh, and I could go on about Lilley for a very long time. Thank God I practiced defamation law.
You probably could, just because it's not like the Sun's going to review your book. It's not like teenage nonfiction or teenage fiction. So that's about as high as they go, I think, for Sun readers.
You can say anything they want. The last time a Sun reader bought a book, I think it was Carved on a Rock. Christ. Yeah, I wrote for the Sun in the late 70s. It was a riot to work there. Then there were a great big staff who went out and broke stories. There's like a handful of people. It's the irony of the Sun is that it exists because of the bailout. I am convinced that if there was no bailout per title, they'd have closed the Sun already. And it has no readership. It has no ads. If I was to pull out my little trunk of old newspapers with my own stories and looked at the Sun of, in say 79, 80 when I worked there, the Sun paper would be like an ad flyer stuffed inside. It's just not, and it has no circulation. Like back in McCullagh's day, they would sell like 150. Everybody, not everybody, but okay, people who had any money at all, like a job, would get the Star, the Telegram, the Globe every day, and there would maybe be 150,000 people out of 700,000 people living in Toronto buying these newspapers every day. Now, what does the Sun sell? Like maybe 80,000 copies in a city of 6 million. Yeah. This is just chump change. A guy like McCullagh would have shut it down ages. Well, he would never have hired a guy like Lilley either. No. These are people who could never have got jobs. So you look at almost all the journalists on the Sun and quite a few of the other papers are people who, even in my day, in the 80s and 90s, would never have ever got into the pages of a newspaper. And a lot of these columnists that you see in Canadian newspapers aren't even being paid for their work. They're doing this because it's gives them credibility for some other like income stream that they have. I've offered to write for papers. They said, sure, it'd be great exposure. I'm like, I don't need any fucking exposure. I want
a paycheck.
Yeah. If it was worth money before, it's worth money now, and it's just pathetic. And maybe there is some other person who wants that, but.
Well, that's a distinction a lot of people don't get nowadays, is the difference between an actual journalist and what columnists are. They're opinion writers.
Yeah,
and that's what all guys like Lilley are.
Well, that's all. But the it used to be that you would be a really good reporter, and if you were a top tier reporter, and I'm talking about somebody like Christy Blatchford, who some people loved, and some people hated. I quite liked her as a person.
Mm-hmm.
But these were people that are big following as journalists, broke stories, won awards, and when you reach sort of a height in your career, they give you a column, right? But your column would be surrounded by pages of real journalism, of shoe leather journalism, where people were out, covering the courts, covering City Hall, writing features about interesting people, doing investigative work, all that kind of stuff. When your paper's full of columnists, all you're doing is basically letting people sit down and type about what they hear in other media, or what they hear from the person they live with, or whatever the hell the source.
Isn't that just called blogging?
It's a fancy blog.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it is, and it just fills space. And I don't know why they even bother. I literally, other than the bailout thing, it makes no sense to me. From a journalistic or commercial point, I'm an arch capitalist. I'm a true believer in making money, and I don't see how they do it, or why they do it. Why they don't consolidate everything into, say, the National Post and just try to have their best paper there. But
but hold it, in the temperature that we live in the society and the culture war that we're watching, and the perception war, right? Which is really there's a bunch of different stuff that goes on when it comes to the hearts and minds and trying to capture those hearts and minds on behalf of whatever ideology that you might be representing. And right. when I look at what happens today, I can clearly see, because listen, I'm not young, but I'm also not that old, but I'm old enough to know that back when we did radio, television, print 15, 20 years ago, there was a responsibility to tell the truth or else, right?
You got it from your colleagues.
If you didn't get it right, you got in trouble. If you called someone a name that was untowards, racist, Nazi, all that stuff, you got in trouble. You couldn't make allegations unless you had fact. There were laws against that. Yeah. I don't know when this happened, because it's almost like we opened up our eyes one day and we had our phone in our hand, and I'm like, hold it, we can say that in the Toronto Sun, we can say that in the National Post. You can use these platforms to scare people with lies now, and you can literally defame, demean. I mean, you practice defamation law. You and I have had a couple of really in-depth conversations about it. That stuff doesn't matter anymore. Neither does the truth, right? So where and when do we see it change? When did you see that kind of sea change? George McCullagh being a case study in Big Men Fear Me, Mark Bourrie, he's here. We're talking about his new book. You can get it on Amazon. It's terrific. But when did you see that start to happen here, as someone who is in the media, someone who's maybe the most well-educated media person in the country? When did you start to see that divergence from this is the news, this is information, to the Toronto Sun, National Post media companies being legitimately just agencies, agencies on behalf of an ideology and a political party?
So I got my first my first newspaper job in the 70s, late 70s. Pardon me.
God bless you.
Thank you. It was another long. So I got in the 70s, 80s, 90s, Ontario's libel laws were so strict that people would jurisdiction shop to come here to sue people, right? And but there was a change. There was a change in law. A couple of big decisions. One was the Grant versus Torstar decision. I think that is the real key one, where basically the Supreme Court of Canada said, yes, if you are fairly honest in your journalism, you can make mistakes and even defame people, and you will not be liable for that. The second thing that happened was the new SLAPP law in Ontario, and I've argued both sides of SLAPP law, cases, and these laws basically involve a weighing of expression, even if it's just evil, versus a person's reputation, which is almost impossible to put a value on. And I think what's happened between the Supreme Court's decision in Grant and the and Ontario slap law, and a kind of Uberization of media, to the point where everybody thinks that just because something is on the internet, it's new and it's cool and it's wide open and it's Wild West, and you could go on as an anonymous person and make up the craziest shit about people, and this is all the new hip tech stuff. I think that's had a lot to do with it. And courts don't want to hear defamation cases. They don't want to hear any cases. Our courts are completely overwhelmed. So the best defamation case I have right now involves a guy who was subjected to a ongoing months-long email campaign against him by sort of his enemies, who got him fired from his job. And I think that's pretty much the level. Like if you're just humiliated, if you're just trashed by trolls, if the harassment that you suffer, people like Millie Kaplan-Murph had someone cross the line, but the line is so outrageously far from what most people would put up with. There's no recourse, and there's no professionalism. And I just give me another minute, okay?
Yeah, please.
Well, so I was a journalist, and they talk about the profession of journalism. Well, we didn't have any standards. Like the Canadian Association of Journalists would make a list of things you're supposed to do or whatever. Nobody gave a shit about the Canadian Association of Journalists. They were usually journalism students or freelancers who couldn't get work anyway. They just wanted to call themselves journalists. I think that's pretty much still the case with them. And there's no criteria for what a journalist is, right? There's no criteria for what a journalist can do.
There's no basic standard, right? Like
in
terms of journalism, yeah.
Not on the license title.
Yeah, and when you're on the radio, probably you're subjected to the Canadian Broadcast Standards Council, which can sometimes do some really crazy shit that's come out of
some
there.
People weren't.
Yeah. So
present company included.
Some people broke it.
Got into a little trouble. We all have our days, right?
Yeah.
And God knows my life's I can't claim perfection. But you live and learn. But at least there's something there. And with journalism today, there isn't they want to be professional. They want to have this special status above the rest of us. Like a journalist is only someone who's exercising their Section 2 charter right to express themselves, which is what we're doing right here. And I don't know, I would say Dean's a journalist and Ryan's a journalist. I don't think I am anymore. But I will come out of retirement if Polyev gets elected. Anyway, anybody can call himself a journalist, and if anybody's got a squawk about it, you can't go to the College of Journalists like they can if they have a criticism of me as a lawyer. It is a very serious thing if the Law Society of Ontario puts my conduct up against its written rules, and these aren't codes of conduct or what you should do or wouldn't it be nice. It's like if you steal from your clients, you're disbarred. If you fuck your clients, you're disbarred. If you are like a total asshole to other lawyers, you can be disbarred. I notice how I made that one a little lighter. I
was going to say, you still have your law license, so
no, lawyers do treat each other badly. But they get away with it. You could, I've seen lawyers disbarred because they just basically went bonkers, but there's nothing like that for journalists. So they want the status, social status of a profession. They want special status in terms of where they can go and what they can do. They want to be able to do things that maybe we can't do. Go to things like on Parliament Hill that we can't go to, and that kind of whole thing. And yet they will not subject themselves to real discipline as a profession. So then you get something like Rebel News or whatever that takes advantage of that, says we're journalists even though you've got a guy like Menzies showing up with the big tits and the microphone, demanding to put a petition.
Did you see that? He looked great.
Yeah,
he looked great.
It was fucking funny, I gotta say. Sorry.
No, it was totally funny.
It was. But at the Oakville school board meeting,
yeah.
and he's with a press pass, right? And so it's just like this coat that they can wear. So journalism has to get its shit together. The reason that lawyers, it's not because we're such fucking ethical people. I know that everyone thinks we are. This pedestal that lawyers are on as being kind, ethical, decent, sword bearers of good humanity. We didn't choose to get to self-regulate. It was a matter of what we do gives us so much power in society. This access that we have, this special access, the fact that I can go to the Ontario Court of Appeal and plead a case and you can't, gives me and my colleagues so much power that we need to be regulated. And either the government can regulate us, and I don't like that, or we can regulate ourselves. Now, a lot of my colleagues are total fucking idiots, but we do a pretty good job of regulating ourselves. And if we steal from you, or if we hurt you in some other way, we actually even are insured by our own insurance company so that you will be paid back. And journalism say, well, if we're regulated like this, we'll lose our freedom. Well, every privilege comes with a certain cost. And it is time, as we talk about things like Bill C-18 and internet regulation, to talk about doing what they've been doing all over, which say in the UK, to be a journalist, you go through an apprenticeship program. You prove yourself to your colleagues. You have to have certain skills which are tested, and then you get accredited as a journalist.
And you got to agree to a code of conduct over there too.
Yeah, right? and they'll drum you out. That was another thing that back in the last century, if you were a journalist that acted like many of the people published in the Sun, or acted like Ezra Levant or whatever, your colleagues would socially pressure you, and the embarrassment of being a pariah among sort of journalists was enough to keep a lot of people in line. And the fact that basically once the business had pegged you as an asshole, you'd never get a job on a decent paper again. That was enough to keep people in line. But now you could be the biggest fucking idiot in Canada, and there are online people who will hire you to do what you yeah, there is to do what you want, right? Brian Lilley has no expertise to write about politics, to write about economics, to write about anything really.
What about COVID, science, medicine,
science, medicine, all that science? It's just and Brian Lilley's just part of it. And when I see somebody say in the Globe and Mail writing about the Ukraine, it's like, well, you've never been there. You probably couldn't have found it on a map until stuff started to happen. Like, why should I care what you think of something?
But aren't these like what you're talking about now is kind of undressing a profession, right? Because listen, there's no way that we should be doing 1 million page views based on someone else's story, right? But we write stories that no one else will. Like we put out a story about Doug Ford and his complete abdication of the people in Ottawa, and yesterday we found out news from people in that are giving testimony, namely Jim Watson, who's the mayor of Ottawa, who's like, hey, listen, we tried to get Doug Ford to the table. He told us it was a waste of time and then lied about sending 1,500 cops here. So you're going to have to talk to him. And I'm like, that is fucking unbelievable to me that nobody's go and check out CTV News this morning. They don't have a story on it. Check out every major news daily here in Ontario. They don't have a story on it. Nobody is. So part of me, like, I'm sitting here trying to do some responsible written work, right? We're trying to talk about these things so people can kind of understand who's coming from where, trying to really undress what's happening in that part of this world, because I think it's really important. We got a lot of confused people, and I take that part of this responsibility fairly fucking seriously. Why don't they? Like, why is it that a little independent blogosphere with a bunch of podcasters and a bunch of people working independently has the nuts to go, hey, everybody, you might want to investigate Doug Ford's abdication of responsibility and his allowance to let the convoy happen, which we heard from the prime minister and the mayor of that city, that he didn't want to have anything to do with it. The fact that nobody was talking about it and still nobody's talking about it today, Mark, is almost as egregious as the lies that they perpetrate, like guys like Brian Lilley writing about how, if vaccines work, we shouldn't have mandates. This is like a year ago. It's almost as responsible as that by omission, is it not?
Yeah. The whole, okay, let's get something clear first. There are some fantastic journalists who are trying really hard, but there just aren't very many of them left. It's such a depleted pool of people. There are some really good journalists, pardon me, at the Emergency Act hearings, and I think Alex Ballingall of the Toronto Star did nail that, the whole business of Ford and Watson trying to pin him down on that. But there would have been a time when there would be like 4 or 5 Hill reporters from each publication, from the Globe, from the Star, from Southern News, which doesn't exist anymore, from the CBC. There would have been tons more people there in real competition with each other, and a lot of the competition is gone simply because you've got like 2 people covering the thing and 2 different various media platforms or whatever. There's no pressure from Toronto to really be first, to really hit hard. A lot of this has to do with Toronto, where Toronto managers have no idea what's happening in Ottawa. So they, while you would pick up on this because, Karima was here and you followed all through the protest, there are a lot of editors and news managers in Toronto who have no clue what the hell happened here during the trucker protest. I think
isn't that like irresponsible though, if you're running a fucking daily newspaper
or
a daily news outlet?
Absolutely, but a lot of these news outlets, if you take a look at a newspaper these days, I mean, if you go get a fucking newspaper, right?
No.
But no, seriously, go do this sometime. It's a great exercise in a coffee shop or whatever. Grab a paper, like a Star or the Globe, not some piece of shit like the Sun, and go through it and see how much news there is in it. You'll have maybe 4 sections. One of them will be something about real estate, something maybe something about cars. A bunch of stories on how to be cool, how to cook, whatever. And maybe there'll be 10 actual news stories in the paper. And that's a trend too that that has really changed over the years. Very, very little actual news gets in. And almost all the news that does get into a newspaper these days or onto the webpage of a newspaper is something that somebody wants on the page. It's not, Dean Blundell Jr. goes out with his little press pass and finds something and exposes, child labor in a toothpaste factory or whatever. These are all things based on a statement by a political party. There's something it's like planted news. There's sort of various
strategic news. That's what I had a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday. He works at a local news outlet. I won't say which one. And he's like, dude, the days of us like commandeering a story and investigating it and getting to the bottom of it, they're gone. Nobody does investigative reporting anymore. That's what fucking W5 and 60 Minutes is for. Nobody. Like, there are specialty outlets that do it, but as a news station, he says what we do is very simple. We affirm people's identifications. We affirm how they feel. This is not about information. This is about affirmation. And so now what I'm seeing is, and he was like, he kind of laid it out for me. And I'm like, so what I'm seeing is this. And he's like, yeah, you're correct. What I'm seeing is this, is you're seeing people that own these outlets, the Stars, the Suns, the radio companies, the media companies. You're seeing them dictate their opportunities to people in terms of delivering information, delivering shows from a perspective that's responsible for their political ideologies and their executive relationships. Like, who are they attached to? Who do they perform for? What's this dog and pony show? And it's lobbyists and it's politicians, but it's essentially the news that we used to come to expect is dead. And the people that deliver it, they are dead. And this is just side taking and trying to reaffirm with those groups through their entities that, no, this is what's really going on. It's the perception war in media. It's not media doing a news war, or it's not people trying to get to the front of the queue to be first in line to say, hey, listen, we do a great job of news and investigative reporting and we've uncovered this. It's no, we're going to affirm your bias. So buy our newspaper. We're going to affirm your bias. So watch our newscast. That's what I see every day. Yeah.
And there's another part of it too, is when the newspapers and TV stations and radio stations had staff, and look at radio news, my God, it's like it's gone. When these outfits had staff, you could take a flyer on a story. There would be times when I was a newspaper reporter, maybe once or twice a week, you'd spend a day or a half a day on a story that just didn't pan out, right? And that just can't happen anymore. Everything has to be a sure thing, and the stuff they run, the stuff that they're fed, is always a sure thing. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of a basic capitalist, basic business situation. Another thing I think is a real lack of imagination and a fear of news managers of anything they've never heard of. And this cuts through all of Canadian television and stuff too. So that's why we have the Amazing Race Canada and Canada's Great Bake Off and stuff, even on the CBC, which could do anything it wants and has chosen to basically do this sort of safe stuff because nobody wants to take a risk. And that includes, so say you're a reporter, you come across something really weird, the three-headed calf of Meaford, Ontario or something. I'm just thinking. I couldn't really think of a real story, but you come up with
that's a story I would read. Okay. I would have, especially with editors.
Yeah. Or the three asshole calf that only has one head, and
we do 40 minutes on this show about that.
Yeah, actually, you'd have it on here too.
Yeah, if there was a cow that was born with three assholes, Mark, we wouldn't be talking to you right now.
That's right.
Letting you know.
We'd have the boxes filled. Now, but the thing is that a lot of these editors, and this started when I was in newspapers, if they hadn't heard of the story, they didn't want it. And you say, well, but aren't we in the news business? But I've never heard of it. Like, has anybody else got it? There's always this fear of going out on a limb and having that limb sawn off, and that limb was not very long for a lot of these editors who really cared a lot more about their careers than about the news. And now, I worked with great editors, and some of them are still friends of mine. Steve Tustin on Twitter, John Ferry, who's running the TV Ontario, brilliant editors. Editors who would have thrived no matter what the news world was. But there are also a lot of editors who just don't have any guts. And these days, it's if you lose your job, say, well, fuck this. I have had enough. I'm sick and tired of blah, blah, blah. I'm out of here. Take this job and shove it. Well, where are you going to go? You're going to be doing PR for the Ministry of Fish if you're really lucky. And, half the people I work with in the press gallery are doing exactly that. I have former colleagues who write, who were like top tier, highest paid journalists who are writing press releases for the, Canada Mortgage and Housing, So everyone is walking around shit scared that someone's going to call them out on something. You could end up like Wendy Mesley. You could end up like, say a guy like Jack Aubrey, who was one of the top solid people, who's now doing, flack for the Bank of Canada. You could end up just in these total dead ends after having a career where people really did kiss your ass because you were such an important journalist, and you either said something stupid like Wendy did, or you just basically the floor fell up from under you, like so many people at Maclean's, at the Toronto Star. The people who've taken buyouts and thought, well, maybe I'll get another job, or thought maybe they teach journalism or whatever, and and they just struggle to get by, and it's probably the most precarious business I can think of
right now. Yeah.
All those things conspire. It was you were, I think, had a safer, better job in the Great Depression on a newspaper than people in media now outside of the CBC.
I agree.
Where do you think it's headed, Mark? Like everything, the ships always have a way of writing themselves, right?
Yeah.
And like we can't live in a post-truth reality forever.
Not with dead tech. See,
How
that's
do you
the problem.
Where do you think it's going?
Well,
The
I think the internet is dying. You know, the internet was going to be all these blogs. It was going to be it was going to be everybody having all this expression. Everybody a publisher, right?
Yeah.
And that turned out to be that there would be several. Blogging is dead. Who goes to web pages anymore? By and large, the internet is not ordinary people publishing anymore. So what's going to emerge in that? And will there be something on paper? I think those are the two big questions. And what role will the government have? And will the government continue to keep fucking up and putting the media in a position where you have greedy owners who don't really care about journalism, taking money from a government, suckering the government into giving money, and in that way destroying journalism? Because people rightly say, well, how can we trust you when you're on the take or getting money from the government? Or how can we trust a news media financed by the government? The government of Canada, and I'm not an anti-Trudeau person, but Trudeau's, my last book was Trudeau's favorite book of 2020. I will never shit on that guy for that, just for that. I just can't, right? But
yeah,
they should never have bailed out. They should have let that ship hit the iceberg and sink. And then
you're talking about traditional media begging for bailouts over the past several years, getting billions in bailouts because they're like, listen, we can't sell enough ads. Everybody's moving to the internet. And the government's like, well, what do you want from us? They're like, 800 million. And they're like, sure, what do you need? Yeah. And that money went to go and pay dividends. And that money went to go pay bonuses. And then what they proceeded to do, let's just take Bell for an example. They get a government payout to help with their payroll during the pandemic, to the tune of, I think, $50 to $60 million. So they take $50 to $60 million, and that was supposed to go to wage relief, so to pay salaries, so that the company could stay solvent, which is fucking hilarious. When we're gonna go, okay, right, whatever. But it was
don't look at the cell phone bank account, guys. Don't look at that one, please.
Don't look at the cell phone money. Just look at this.
Nobody's watching our satellite TV either, because
don't look at the five. Don't look.
Yeah, nobody's upgrading TV packages because they're stuck in their house right now. It's
just
fine.
Focus on this. And so the government's like, sure, COVID, no problem. We get it. They pocket the money, pay it out to shareholders and stakeholders, and fire 400 people on their mental health day. Like, we're not talking about an industry led by people with strong values here. We're not doing
where's the scruples
at all. And that's what I'm saying is if you want to look at technology as ushering in the death of traditional media, sure, great, but it ain't. What ushers in the death of traditional media? Greed, pure fucking unadulterated greed. And I, like you, am a massive capitalist. So I'm the guy that's got his fingers in 20 different pies trying to make it all work. But you know what I've never done? Never lied to the government and said I need a whole bunch of money, otherwise I'm not going to make it. I just go and do it. Or if it doesn't work and I'm in the wrong space, I evolve, pivot to a space where we can make money, unlike this media conglomerate here. And what is Mosgrove calls it? He calls it the mafia, the media trench coat mafia. But that's exactly what it is, right? And so everybody's disincentivized and scared to fucking death to be one of the stories that you told us about of your friend who's writing copy for an insurance magazine now, or writing copy for the Canadian Mortgage Company, because as you point out, where else are you going to fucking go? There's nowhere else to go in this.
Still got to pay bills, exactly.
Right.
It wasn't just the Bell that was taking this money. It was the righteous Canada Land took money. Everybody went to with their cap in hand and got this cash. And the government knew. Okay, this is not new. Maybe you have to be an old fucker like me who's stuck around too long. The only reason I live my life is because I have the most fabulous wife, and I just couldn't possibly depart this.
Isn't that the best part? I have the same thing.
Yeah,
exactly. We get to whatever the hell we
want. You guys
want.
are the biggest greasers I've ever met in my life. Your wife's watching,
We're happy.
guaranteed.
No, she's not. My wife will never watch this because she's
afraid.
She's a nice lady.
No, because she's tied up in the back with things in her ears.
Because she knows you. Is that why?
No. Because she's mute. No. In the 90s, the government did the same thing with magazines, and people forget this. So the government let Time and Reader's Digest finally advertise. I mean, this sounds insane, right? On the same, sell advertising on the same playing field as everybody else, and to help cushion the blow of this, I feel like I'm talking about how to make a fucking flint arrowhead. The government started the magazine fund to give extra money to the magazine publishers to beef up their product to be able to compete with that juggernaut Reader's Digest and Time Magazine, which we're going to come in here and just like dominate Canadian media, right? So the government starts the Canadian Magazine Fund to give the extra money. Now, have you gone to a store lately and seen how many Canadian magazines there are left?
Yeah, none.
Like none.
No.
If you find like Cottage Life or something in your Shoppers Drug Mart, you'll be really lucky. You might find a McLean's. But the thing was that this was going to save the industry. So the money's still flowing. It doesn't matter. We don't have any magazines anymore, but they never cut it. And it wasn't extra money. Well, all these companies did was they just pocketed what they used to pay their writers, which were almost all freelancers. The rate has been $1 a word for a decent magazine since the 80s. Hasn't changed. And the magazine industry died. So the bailout didn't work. And this was something that happened, about 1998 or so. I think that magazine fund came in. Anyway, it's been over 20 years to see how that whole process worked. So bailouts don't even save things. I mean, I suppose if you threw $1 billion at the magazine industry, we might still have some of it, some Ontario Fishing Magazine or something left, but there are no magazines. Yeah, there's like one magazine company left in the country. The one that owns McLean's and Toronto Life. And
when was the last time you picked up a magazine? Like, when was the
have
last
you seen
time
have you seen the price of them now? Like the actual hard.
They're like this thick.
Yeah.
And they're subsidized.
But dude, you can read anything you want on your phone. That's the thing, right? Like I would never buy a magazine ever, to the point, rarely do I buy books for that very
I think
same
the
reason.
point went by here somewhere, then, Dave. The point is that the fucking money's still going.
I know.
That's
my point. No, I get what you're saying.
It's
no one's like, among all of us, nobody here has read a magazine in probably a couple of decades, right? But the money is still coming in for those magazines and the people that own them.
Years ago, the government of Canada employed a bunch of guys who tasted tea to make sure it met a certain standard. This is always something the Auditor General would bring up, for decades and decades and decades. And it's like that with magazines. And I suspect that when the last newspaper, stops printing, and they've already stopped printing Monday editions of a whole pile of newspapers across Canada, but when they're finally dead, I think these hedge funds are still going to have these checks rolling in every month. It's divorced from.
Don't report to the government that grandma died. Just keep taking the old age
at the end of the year, and the money comes. But what they should let the fucking thing hit the rock, let its guts fall out, and then let smart, industrious people pick through it. Because the thing that would never change is that people want to know what's going on. It's not like the newspapers came along and people went, "Oh, news, they discovered something interesting." People wanted to know what was going on. People wanted to know when the ship was coming in from India full of tea, or China or whatever. People wanted to know how the country was doing in the war, or who was winning the hockey game or whatever. People are going to tell them this stuff. And people wanted to know what was going on in Parliament. People would, and they were told that too. And these are all things. Not only that, people fought very hard to be able to cover these things, and it's a disgrace to the journalists of the past, who went to prison for the right to cover parliaments, that we have fucking assholes who are only there to social climb in many cases, passing themselves off as political journalists. Now,
well, you wrote a book on the great war reporters of our time. Like, I mean.
Yeah.
standing in contrast. That's such a great little fucking comment, is that you stand in contrast to, the effort that people went to put their lives in danger to bring people legitimate information. And then you look at the sewering of guys and assholes like Brian Lilley, who have never been in danger, who are using the great history of people who do work, freedom of the press, dude. Like, the freedom of the press is a constitutionally protected thing in the United States. Like, you people have the opportunity to hold you accountable. This is being weaponized. Like, the history of that is being weaponized.
Getting back to the book that I'm here to try to whore.
Yes, big man.
McCullagh, who, what have I called this guy? A fascist. I've called him a psycho, basically. All these things. He was willing to go to prison, and he damn near did in the Second World War, to make a point about the fact the government was covering up the military fuck up at Hong Kong. And can you imagine a newspaper proprietor, Paul Godfrey or Jamie Irving or Biddov at the Star or whatever, even for a moment considering the possibility of going to jail because they want to run something in the paper? Are you fucking kidding me?
No, dude, it's fascinating because I had a meeting not long ago with, I'll just say it, the guys at the Star, publishers at the Star.
I like Biddov. He's a good shit. I met him.
Great guy. Jordan's a great guy.
But he's not going to prison anytime soon if he can help it.
No. Neither is his partner, and they're on the outs now. It's being played out in the papers. I'm sure you've seen it. It's kind of a big war. But anyway,
never get into business with your friends.
No, I never would. Paul Rivet, I think his name. Both probably good guys. I know Jordan well. Great guy. He's always been helpful, nice guy. And we were talking about how we do things here. And he's like, so what do you do? Well, we do, wholesale stuff. Like, we'll do a podcast, but that podcast is based on, written work. That written work is then shared throughout the network. It's organic. So, the idea is that story lives on all platforms, and that the people that are delivering it have the ability to do it on all platforms. Right. And his mind was blown. He's like, wait a second. You guys are like 5 years ahead of us. And I'm like, okay, great. Yeah. But he's like, we're just trying to sell memberships. Like, it was one of the other guys that was in the meeting. He's like, dude, we just want to sell subscriptions. And I'm like, well, then you're going to get left behind. Right. Yeah. And they're like, no, we're going to be fine. And then you open up the paper a couple months later, it's like big fight. Everybody can't decide which direction to go. And I'm like, we're just going to keep going, because the idea that there needs to be somebody here or some people here after it implodes, and it is imploding. We're watching media in this country implode. That people feel shitty about their jobs. They're afraid to work for somebody else. They don't want to toe the party line. They want to be able to create real information. They want to be accountable, and they can't, but they want to do all those things. So we give everybody that opportunity to do that here. That's what we're doing. The next evolution of what we're doing, Mark, and about, obviously, because you're coming along for the ride. But like, there is nobody thinking that way. There is nobody thinking remotely altruistically about how to be able to create a business around the idea that journalism in itself is still excellent, and there are great people out there that have the ability to drive that hammer, right? But nobody else is interested in doing that. There's nobody else out there, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, because we've done a ton of studies on this, because we needed to know where to go with what we're doing. And the thing that came out, which was fascinating to me, was a little study that said 28% of Canadians trust mainstream media in this country. 28. Back in 1950, it was 87. 87% of Canadians.
There's a survey.
Go ahead.
The survey today out. You'll find it. It's been retweeted on Twitter by several people, including the guy that used to be the principal secretary to Trudeau.
Butts.
Gerald Butts.
Gerald Butts put this thing up. In the United States, 87% of Americans think the mainstream media is the biggest threat to democracy. 87%. That covers every Republican and a shit ton of Democrats. Yeah. That's a bipartisan belief among American people that the media is part of the problem. The only media in the States that I can think of that makes serious money out of just subscriptions is the New York Times. And the reason that they can do it is because they're just so much better than everybody else. So you can either be like complete trash and just appeal to people's most venal side, like Rebel, and just like beg for money every time you can play the victim, and I think they can make money doing that, or you have to be really fucking good. But the mediocre middle will not survive, and that's the post media papers, It's the little rags and little towns where they wouldn't say shit if their mouth was full of it, even though the council's stealing the blind, the cops are crooked. Like those things are done. It's going to be a very different landscape of top quality stuff, of really weird stuff, of multimedia stuff. And the things that are going to sell are the things that people haven't heard of before. You cannot sell. First of all, you can't sell on Thursday the thing you gave away on Wednesday, which people have been doing for years in media, right?
Yeah.
That never made any sense. And you can't sell the things that the CBC is giving away, which is just about every kind of sort of fed out news. So it's going to have to be a different landscape, and I don't think that the subsidized media will survive even with the subsidies, because I just don't think the government can carry the full cost, and I don't think there's any money on the table for them outside of the subsidies, because no one's going to buy what they're selling anymore. The advertisers are long gone, and the readers are just going to say every time they see something. Of course, if they agree, then that's good journalism. But every time they see something they disagree with, whether they're right or wrong, they're going to say, "Well, this is just the government. This is the bribe money. It's the kiss of death." The only way for them now is to walk away from it, and they won't, because they organized to do this. The business plan is built on it, and the government's willing to do it. So you've got everything done for this fucking. There's consent on both sides. And a real horny need for it.
Yeah.
Did we break it with that mentality of breaking news needs to be all the time, every minute? Is that when we broke it because of the fact that you can't, like you said, you can't sell on Thursday what you gave away on Wednesday? Is that not what we're doing with breaking, like that mentality that CNN and
everything's
Fox
breaking news?
Everything. And like
more,
you're completely inundated with it, and I think that's why print went away, because how can you print it? You wouldn't be able to keep up.
There's no such thing as breaking news in print.
Yeah, and I think I think what happened was that newspapers were posting stories, like especially sort of 15 years ago, even before that, say from around 2001 or 2000, up until they started doing paywalls, where they were, as soon as the story was written, they got posted on the webpage and people could read it for free. And then the next day you were supposed to go and put like $3 out for a Globe and Mail. Why the hell would you do that?
You already read the story.
Well, there was no news in it because you had already read it. You'd already read their story. And I think this was a decision made by people in the ad department who didn't realize that they were actually selling a product of news and not a product that was called advertising. And they thought that they would, that people would go to the webpage and they see the ads and they get this ad money, and then Twitter and Facebook came along and Google, and they just took that money. So that was off the table. So then they're putting the stuff on the webpage anyway, because it's convergence. Remember that? So you're going to have, everybody's going to be doing radio and TV and web and newspapers all at once, which just made these kids like go insane, and it didn't work. And you were going to give almost all of it away except for the newspaper, which people were going to pay for. Like the whole thing. I was actually teaching journalism in 2007, 2009, when this convergent thing was, and I said, this is fucking crazy. Like, none of you profs ever worked as journalists. You cannot do this. You cannot carry this equipment. You cannot get this material out. You can't do a good job on it. You can't go in depth with it. And you're going to oversaturate anyway. And you can't monetize it. And they went on and on and on. And they did all their hiring in journalism schools and brought in the students like Chose. Oh, my wife's escaped.
Yeah, there she is.
Wave to the crowd, dear. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Put the chain back on. Anyway. Yeah. You just couldn't. It just couldn't work. But they trained a whole generation of journalists in that mentality, right? And hi, Mel, from my wife. Yeah, but what they've done is they've just leapt from one thing to another. Oh, web pages. Oh, money there. Oh, convergence. Oh, money there.
Well, it was like, and I remember when I was in radio and the internet came around and there was like podcasting, I was like making fun of it. Oh, it's for losers. It's everybody's podcasting. And they're like, no, we're going to get involved in it. And I'm like, okay, how are you going to do that? Well, we're just going to claim that's part of our universe now. We're just going to piss in the corner like a dog. And we're going to tell people that we do it. Nobody does it. Right. Like, case in point, I'm on my old radio station's website the other day because someone's like, check out the front page of their website. I'm like, all right.
They don't have you blocked?
No, strangely enough, they don't. And it was a web page. It had a listen live button, it had the logo, and it had a picture of someone dancing. And you scrolled through it. There wasn't an activation. There was no information. There was nothing. There was nothing. Just, hey, just want you to listen to it. And I'm like, my God, you guys still don't get it. It's like 2022. There are no ads to sell. No one wants to work for you. Nobody wants to work in traditional media. If it's not for the anxiety, it's for the paychecks and the idea that we're watching how they treat people. I mean, Lisa LaFlamme's a great example. Patricia Jaggernoth, another great example. Hundreds of people. We know all of these people, the way that industry has treated people. And if you spend any time in traditional media in the past 40 years, it's not for the weak of heart. Like, I mean, every single day in traditional media, you walk into a building, if you work there, and it would be anxiety from the second you walked in, wondering if the people in the office were firing you in that meeting, wondering if they're firing other people, wondering if the ratings you got back, which you got, and it was every 3 months was a resume, right? You got back your ratings, or it was every quarter. You would you only did these many page views, or no one's reading your stuff. It's literally like a day-to-day anxiety-ridden, PTSD-producing industry. So my theory is you got to go outside the industry now because, like politics, people like you are too smart to stay in it. You just fuck off and go become a lawyer and get your doctorate in media studies so you can lord it over people. And they have to go out and get guys like Brian Lilley. They're like, let's just find some asshole who licks the balls of the party. And they're like, Brian Lilley, Ottawa, bring him to town. And they're like, sure, great. Will he write whatever we want him to write? Yes. Absolutely, he will. And so, you've got the convergence of the idea that this dead technology is there. And then you've got the idea that these people that were in charge of an industry, specifically radio or television or print, in charge of an industry, are so protectionist for their own good, they'll do whatever they're told by their shareholders and stakeholders, right? So it's this marginalization of actual information, but it's also marginalization of the people. And now, like, I had a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about radio, and he's asked me if I might come and help him out and do some stuff for him. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to. And he's like, why not? And I go, well, it's too cheesy now. It's like inviting someone over to your house going, hey guys, we're going to watch a movie tonight on beta. I'm like, or VHS. It's just this pointless exercise. You almost don't want to tell people that you're doing it, right? Oh, I'm a writer for a paper. Or I'm a radio guy, or I'm a television presenter. You're like, no, man, like that people in that business, not just the PTSD and the stress and the environment and the culture being as poisonous and toxic as has always been. And fuck, I can speak to it. You can too. But it's also, these people don't have an idea of what they're doing with any of it, right? And so you've got people like us, people like you, people that have these digital properties that are like, we're coming. You can't stop us. It's never going to end. You're going to empower these people to come and eat your lunch. Then the subsidies are going to end, and they're going to be standing there going, what do we do? Right? Yeah. What did we do?
Because you don't have a bunch of
selfish assholes.
You don't have a bunch of shareholders wanting 10% dividends. You don't have the bank wondering if you're going to make a payment. I hope.
Nope.
Or if you did, not very much. The capital startup costs for something are very low if you can keep yourself alive. And so I think that's where you're going to see the creative side of things. And you'll see a lot of sorting on podcasts, I think, as time goes by, of ones that make it and ones that don't. But that's the way she goes. The newspapers started off like that too. Lots and lots of newspapers in Canada in the 1830s. Towns with 5 or 6, 10 of them or whatever, and it does work itself out. I listen to Spotify, and I have Sirius satellite on my car and on my phone, and that's it. And I'll listen to CBC on their app.
Do you read newspapers?
I read web pages, and once in a while, if I'm sitting in a coffee shop by myself, I'll buy a paper, kind of like for old time's sake, and go through it, because actually reading a newspaper is still a better way to get the news than reading the webpage. I find a lot more interesting stuff as I go through the paper, but I will be fucked if I'm going to pay $5 for a Globe, a Thursday Globe and Mail.
Yeah,
it's like magazines. They priced it to the point. Anybody who ever took basic, economics knows that there's a supply side and a demand side, and there's a part where they meet where the price is, and these guys are right off the chart in terms of price. But I guess they really don't want you to buy the paper. They want you to read the webpage, subscribe
yeah.
to it. So they put out a paper, and again, this is the box checking thing of why the Sun exists or whatever, is that they will get the subsidies because of the fact that there's like 2 or 3 newspapers thrown into a milk store box or whatever, but you can't even find them. There are no newspaper boxes
It's
around.
almost like they're staying in business just for the subsidies in some cases, right? Like, and then plus we can be an agent or an arm for a political party or an ideology, so why not? Like, I mean, let's stay.
Yeah, the owners have some clout, like guys like Bidoff and that. They could have invested in lots of other things that were sure bets. I think they got a great deal on that paper. I wish I had been in on that one. I think they really suckered John Hondrick on that deal, but that's the way she goes, right?
Yeah.
Their shoes, I probably would have done the same thing, but we're gonna have the subsidized media, and I don't understand why it's subsidized. Like they're not going to subsidize you. They're going to subsidize the people who failed.
Yeah, but by virtue of that alone, you can't take them seriously. You do according to who subsidizes them. Anytime they write something about the government, you're like, I don't believe any of that shit, just by virtue of the fact that you bribed them.
Right, and the winners and losers of the future will be actually being made, winning and losing, while in the background there's all these subsidized hedge funds and partnerships and these moribund papers with skeletal staffs, because there's no incentive. If you're subsidized like this, there's no incentive at all to do a good job. There's only an incentive to do the job. So you put out the paper every day, but the subsidies are actually
quality.
an anti-incentive to hire. They're an anti-incentive. I mean, unless they structure them in a way that they pay for hiring, they're an anti-incentive to shit disturb or to take any kind of risk that would get you sued or raise the cost of your libel insurance. They will subsidize mediocrity. They will subsidize that. What I was talking about, that sort of middle section of mediocrity, that is the thing that will die and should die in media. And in the end,
but it's like welfare, right? Like if you give someone welfare, like CERB, how many people that went on CERB are like, it's fucking pretty sweet, I'm not going back to work.
I don't think there were that many. I think that's a bit of a myth.
Some of them.
It wasn't that much money. I mean, there were people who probably never had any money.
Well, it's the same guy that gets cash for life, where you get like $4,000 a month for like 25 years, and he goes, "I'm a billionaire."
Yeah.
and then you also have the media, those media entities that are collecting those subsidies, are literally holding the governments that subsidize them hostage with, if you don't subsidize us, we're just going to tell everybody that you're trying to censor us and silence us. Yeah, that's why you're taking it away, because and then it's a vicious cycle. And you're right, it creates lazy reporting and lazy. Why bother? Yeah, why bother?
Okay, so let me before we let you go, Mark, and I appreciate you being here. Mark Bourrie is our guest. He's an author. He's a journalist. He's a lawyer. He's done it all. New book called "Big Men Fear Me." Mark Bourrie, the fast and life and quick death of Canada's most powerful media mogul. George McCullagh is a great book. There's a whole bunch of different stuff going on in that book that just pertains to today with the media and the kettling and all the other bullshit.
I wrote it to be fun to read. It's a fun read, folks.
Well, I'm excited to get it. I asked you for a copy of it a while ago, and you didn't send it to me, so I bought it.
I sent you a PDF. Fuck's sakes.
No, you didn't. You said you were gonna, and you never did. I didn't get it.
Well, you should have told me. I would have sent it to you.
You already paid for it. Make him pay for it.
Open and smell it. Oh yeah, paid for it. Full price.
Like $2.49. That's fucking awesome.
Buddy, any way I can support you, I'm happy to do it. Seriously.
And if you're watching on YouTube, in the pinned comment of YouTube is the link to get Mark's book right now. So just click on that. And
yeah. And it's also in the description. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it. Okay, so I want to ask you about this. You're watching the Emergency Act hearing. Before I let you go, obviously this is the hearing that determines fact as to why the Emergency Act was being used. of particular interest is the lawyer for Freedom Corp. His name's Brendan Miller.
Poor man.
I'm going to play a clip. As a lawyer, I found this particularly interesting. And Jim Watson, the mayor who was on the show.
Is this him cross-examining Jim Watson?
Oh, yeah.
This is a master class in how not to do a cross-examination. They should show this in every law school. How not. No. And one thing, before you play it, everyone talks about the leading questions. In a cross, you're supposed to use leading questions. So give the guy a break on that, but then just watch how Watson schools this guy.
Okay, here we go.
Right, and the premier told you that he wouldn't join the tripartite meetings because it was pointless.
He felt it was a waste of time.
Right, and it was.
How do you know that?
Because you were looking for officers, and they couldn't order officers.
No, that's, I don't think you fully understand the situation, that I can't pick up the phone and start barking orders at a commissioner of any police service, whether it's the OPP or the RCMP. There's a protocol in place, and that protocol is to have a politician to politician. And the RCMP and the minister said the same thing. He can't direct Commissioner Leckie, but he can certainly pass along our request. And she made the decision, and we thank her and the commissioner, because at the end of the day, they did provide the resources that ended up cleaning up this terrible situation our residents found themselves in.
Right, and this protocol that you've been talking about and mentioned, is it in writing?
Well, it's the law that politicians are not allowed to direct police services. It's very...
I understand that, but there's nothing that I know of, at least, and if you could point me to it, that says that you were prevented from either calling Commissioner Leckie or calling the commissioner of the OPP and saying, hey, we need some more resources. Can you do this?
Again, I think that would be entirely inappropriate, to give the powers of operational responsibilities to politicians is a very
I'm not saying that, sir.
slope.
I'm asking you if there's an actual policy that says you are not allowed to call and make a request to the police. Is there a policy in that regard?
Well, our city solicitor advised that the route that we should be taking is the letter to the premier and the prime minister and the two appropriate
Okay, so it wasn't a protocol. It was what the city solicitor told you to do.
Well, I'm assuming that he would have told me what to do based on the law of the land. And,
Okay.
the policy is very,
I'll ask
very
him
clear.
about that when he testifies.
Sure.
The other question.
Okay. Ooh. Ooh.
Poor preparation makes piss poor performances, my trial advocate teacher used to say. Yeah, it's a great idea. We'll have the mayor's going to call it the chief of police and tell him to go around to Dean's house because someone's smoking some fucking weird shit in there and I don't think it's pot. Yeah, I think that's
And I also don't like his radio show, so you got to go arrest that guy because he says bad things about me on the TV.
Well, and that's what I want to ask you. Like, from a legal perspective, and I watched you shit post him on Twitter the other day, and I'm like, fuck, I love Mark Bourrie. This guy's like, that's the dumbest shit I ever seen in my whole life. Effectively, is what you said. But like, how do you qualify how stupid that line of questioning is after repeated attempts to ask the same question to politicalize whatever the fuck that means? The whole process where he's like, yeah, it's sir. Is this written down anywhere that you can't call the cops and just force them into doing things? Cops from other jurisdictions.
Yeah,
he's like, what's the law? And he's like, yeah, but is it written anywhere? It's like, yeah, on paper, probably.
In a
Go look
law
it up.
book, maybe.
They call it legal research. You do it before you come to
Court.
Before you come to court. The thing, as a lawyer, if I found myself in the weeds, I mean, Jim Watson is many things, but he's been around long, like he was a fine mayor in his day, but it's time for him to go. It's been time for a while, but you're not going to get him a municipal law. Like this guy was mayor for 15 years and was minister of municipal affairs. So like this fucking guy is like the longest serving big city mayor in Canada. Plus he was the minister in charge of municipalities. So if you're going to try and take this guy on, you better be ready. And this poor lawyer, he wasn't ready.
No.
And another thing too is when you get into a situation like that, where it's obvious you're going nowhere, leave. Like I don't mean leave the room, but go, just leave it, because it just became a circular thing where Watson just kept telling him you're wrong. And it would have been there's a lot to be said for having every side have good representation of this thing, and this man may be a great lawyer. I've criticized. No, I mean he practices some kind of law somewhere, and you know, but no, this is arcane law. There aren't that many people who know how government works, right?
Yeah,
and it would have been good for everybody, including us, if he had been able to do a good job to test the truth of everything that Watson said. And it would have been helpful if he'd had somebody be able to walk him through the stuff. Or they found a lawyer who actually knew how government administration worked. And he didn't. And
but are most of these lawyers like just from the JCCF side? And like, aren't they just kind of like hangers on? Like Keith Wilson, dude, that guy is fucking hilarious. Like, I know that you're not supposed to shitpost or talk poorly about other lawyers and destroy their reputations and stuff like that. But like every lawyer that's shown up on behalf of Freedom Corp, which by the way, they're now a corporation, right? When you got a bunch of money in hockey, you got to be a corporation. But like when you're every single lawyer that I've seen them speak on behalf of them is either terrible at their fucking jobs, or they've misrepresented the truth, or they've completely ignored one massive aspect of this, which is that we all fucking saw it. Like, that's the part that I can't get over is every time I watch a JCCF lawyer or one of the lawyers that's representing, you know, trying to explain to us that no, what you saw wasn't what you saw. I'm like, you guys fucking, are you serious right now? Like, I mean, we were there.
But this cluster of people like Rupa, what's her face? You know,
Rupa Subramapaya, I think her name.
Yeah,
is.
who lives in Ottawa, who says it was just bouncy castles and
great
and sterile, clean. You drink the water in this hot tub. Like there are people who
daycare was 5-star.
If I was about to retire as a lawyer and somebody had hired me to be their counsel for the for residents or whatever, I would have done how I would have done this. It'd be my last case before I was like thrown out or surrendered my license. I would have walked in with a fucking air horn, right? Said, "Oh, you want to know why this?" For about 10 minutes. He said, "That's why you need the fucking Emergencies Act." And this is like 10 o'clock in the morning. How would you like this at 4 o'clock in the morning? When you got like my daughter and her husband and her baby who had COVID, who lived on the edge of this thing, and the baby's teething, and those fucking horns are going at 4 in the morning. You make this a jury of people who actually suffer. Oh, well, people who live downtown in Ottawa, there aren't very many. Well, there are lots. Oh, they're all rich. No, it's actually one of the cheap places to live in the city. It was bullying and abuse. People shit in doorways. I went in and talked to a potential client after the thing was over. I almost got involved in a lawsuit over it, not me being a lawyer for it, and saw this man literally clean shit out of business doorways on Spark Street, which is this like dead mall behind, like 1 street over from the street the Parliament buildings are on. Mm-hmm. It was disgusting. They talked about, it didn't disrupt anything. There's a mall, a big mall in Ottawa called the Rideau Center. The problem is a lot of people in Canada have never been to Ottawa. It really would help if they had. This great big mall that shut down full time because on the first day these fucking idiots went in there and just like hassled all these kids who were working in stores. And then when the owners of the businesses went to the cops said, "Oh well, if you can't handle it, shut down for 3 weeks," and they're still paying. Well, this is like the most expensive real estate in Ottawa. They're still paying their rent. They're still paying their fees, taxes, their BIA, all that shit. They were driving around schools and creeping people out. They were my son-in-law, who's much more conservative, I think, than any of us, and might have actually sympathized with him had his kid not been teething while they kept him awake. Had some guy trying to pick a fight with him, and fortunately for the guy, it didn't actually come to a fight because I think he'd be missing a few fucking teeth at this point. But it was that bad, and it's been soft soaped by media who've called it a protest and a whole bunch of other words that do not describe it. And these people came to do it January the 6th. They couldn't pull it off. The Ottawa cops basically mutinied, and the politicians had no clue on how. Well, the city of Ottawa got it completely wrong. they seem to be living in some world that I'll never visit. Oh yeah, these guys are gonna park their trucks 5 kilometers away, take the fucking LRT, right? Yeah, sure, that's gonna like. It's whacked, and it is important to get to the bottom of this. And I think every side that if you're pursuing truth through an adversarial legal system, every side should have a good lawyer. I'm not gonna shit on all these lawyers. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't want to go toe to toe with Watson either, frankly, on municipal law.
Municipal law, yeah.
Yeah.
I would have done better than this guy, I think. But they wouldn't have hired me anyway. They were looking for somebody who thought.
Would you have referred to the?
And,
would you have referred to the federal government in Canada as the executive branch? Because that's what they did.
No. I took grade 9 history and civics.
Yeah. Okay. Just checking.
I represented very conservative. I represented Maxime Bernier. I got no problem representing these people and giving them the best representation I can do because I'm an intellectual whore, which all lawyers have to be, right? When it comes to my work on that side of things. But I think, you do have to be prepared and you have to know your way around it. And it is really, really arcane law. And, to find people who know it, who aren't actually in the government, like my wife would have cleaned up there. She's a federal lawyer because she knows how the fuck it works, right? He wouldn't have got caught. I wouldn't have got caught in that mire either. But just about every lawyer from outside of Ottawa will be like, "Why didn't you go through?" And they think that there's these chains of command that exist and lines of responsibility that exist that don't exist. But in terms of just the lawyering of it, when you get to the point, well, why did you react with such rage to my client questions, and then the answer is because he just shot my brother in the fucking head. Be the right answer. It's like, and I'd say this guy had a pretty bad day.
Yeah, they all have. I mean, it's just been crazy to watch. What did you make of I don't know if it's a bombshell, but that Doug Ford sat on his hands for 3 weeks and refused to take part in any solution as an Ottawa resident. I know you're in Ottawa. What?
Well, I was surprised that he didn't actually at least pretend. I mean, we knew that he fucked off to Muskoka, right? That he was basically skidooing the whole time and trying to make sure that none of this stuck to him. But the fact that he didn't at least pretend to, and I had friends in the feds who told me that had given me a different story on that he'd actually, they were kind of happy with Ford, but that might have been other stuff with the COVID thing. It might not have been the actual protest, come to think of it. There is a pretty good relationship between the Trudeau government and the Ford government through Dominic LeBlanc, who's the Minister of Intergovernmental Relations, and is the kind of guy everybody likes. And he's just fighting cancer and stuff, so people got a lot of sympathy for the guy. They cut him a lot of slack. But the idea that he just wouldn't show up. And then another thing, too, is remember this Dean French guy that keeps popping up is Doug Ford's buddy, right?
Yeah.
So he's probably the actual surrogate for it in all this. It's and they're right that, and I've seen this mocked actually today by I think it was Coyne, that the steps are Ottawa Police, OPP, then RCMP, right? That you could jump over the OPP and the RCMP. Another thing that you don't hear people say, I love dogs that don't bark. When you listen for them and you know that they're there. And in my story, in my book, I have a dog who doesn't bark. He's an actual black hole character through the whole book, who we don't know, but he's important, and we know that. The Army. Remember, everybody talked about bringing the Army in. Have you heard a word about that in this inquiry? Not a fucking word.
Why?
That's a really good question. It's certainly what the protesters wanted. They wanted to be driven out of there by the Army. They wanted to make this a War Measures Act, like a 90s moment. and it didn't.
I said that to a friend of mine. I said, you know what? I don't know if they were there for freedom. I don't know if they were. Well, they said the MOU said they were to hang people and arrest people and execute people, all that other bullshit.
Yeah.
But I think what we're seeing today, in lieu of no army guys coming in to give them the visuals of a despotic leader, which is really what they wanted.
Armored personnel characters.
You think
armored personnel carriers on the Highway 417 was what the Conservative Party wanted and what the protesters wanted. Absolutely. And the fact that after Slowly was ousted, Steve Ball, the guy who took over the Ottawa Police Force, was able to put together that group of cops from all over, from both sides of the Ontario-Quebec border, and do what I the smoothest. And I've been around stuff like this, working on the Hill, seeing stuff even in the States. That was the smoothest clearance of a crowd like that I think anyone's ever done. And if you want to compare it to anything, take a look at all the stuff that was happening after George Floyd's death in the States, and compare that to how that crowd cleared in Ottawa, and you just see like that's the A plus job that Steve Ball did when he took over as police chief from Slowly. So that was a huge disappointment for those guys. They really, they thought they had their magic moment when the old lady seemed to get trampled by the horse. Like they were always looking for the money shot.
Yeah,
I've got the money shot in upstairs on a VCR. But other, it's they just didn't get it.
Yeah,
they just didn't get what they wanted.
Well, and
now
that's incredible.
Yeah,
and now we're here. Now we've got like an entire hearing that's consuming the country because they didn't get their fucking soundbite.
Yeah,
and the way I look at it.
Go back through the stuff that was written and how much of the stuff was where they didn't even it was the idea of in the media, the sort of consensus idea was that all the police would be skipped over and they'd have to bring the army in. And now that whole story got changed, and the subtlety of that is quite interesting to me.
Yeah, fascinating, dude. I love having these conversations, especially out in the open, where we can wonder aloud, right? Like everybody wondered aloud about how come Doug Ford didn't do anything for 3 weeks, and all of a sudden we see the email change where the prime minister's like, Doug's hiding. He's politicizing this, and Watson's like, we've tried to meet with him like 100 times. He won't meet with us, and he's like, we'll try and talk to him again tomorrow. Well, this guy's going to talk to him. Maybe he'll meet with us. Maybe he'll help us. And then when you understand the chain of command and all the other stuff, and then it finally gets dumped out, you're like, well, of course, of course it worked that way, which is fascinating to me that he didn't even bother covering his tracks. And then he stood there the other day with Trudeau. He's like, I stand shoulder to shoulder with the prime minister on this. This is great. I'm like, no, you didn't. You fucking made it happen.
That
it was
guy,
awesome to watch.
He's got like balls of pounds of hash that he sold. I mean, the man, he just, he'll just look you in the eye, just sell you that mule with the bad leg. Like, he's got his majority. He's just he is. It's just you cannot shame that guy. It's I mean, when I guess when you grow up with Rob, you always look good, but Christ almighty.
Yeah, I don't think it's by design. I think the aloofness is natural. So.
Yeah. Dude, it's been great to have you today, though, Mark.
Always
and I really appreciate you having a chat with us about your book, Big Men Fear Me. You can get it anywhere you get books. It's a great one. I just ordered it. I should get it this week. Hopefully by Friday, I'll give you a full review. Not that I'm a book reviewer, but I haven't read one single bad review of this book, and there are many of them. And if you're interested in how we got here today, speaking of disinformation, populism, how certain people really drive that in society and culture, and what the end of those people traditionally always is, please go and read this book and get it wherever you get your fine books. It's such a great little table setter and will help people kind of understand kind of where we're at today, Mark. But it's always great to have you. Thank you so much for doing this, brother.
See you in Toronto.
You got it.
Yeah,
I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Mark.
Mark's coming to Toronto, and he's also joining us on our next adventure, which I can't talk about. Can't talk about it.
I know, but you keep telling everybody you're going to talk about it, then you don't talk about it, and
no, not talking about it.
I know.
We will when it happens. We'll talk about it when it happens, but I'm not talking about it now.
I don't have to talk about it. You can't make me.
No, you can't make me do anything. We were going to talk about a bunch of other stuff that had to do with Alberta today, too. We were going to talk about Danielle Smith. We were going to talk about Jamie Saleh, who's on a fucking heater.
It's been a big
But instead, you know what we're going to do? We'll save all that for tomorrow. You know why?
Oh, I do know why. That's right. Somebody from Alberta.
He's from Alberta, Calgary. Threw all his chips in the middle. He was like an Ontario guy. He's like, I'm moving to Cowtown. Whoop. And now he's in the middle of it. And he's the lead columnist for one of my favorite digital dailies. It's called The National Observer. We've had him on many times in this very program. And the Danielle Smith stuff is so fucking good. We're going to go through what he knows about this young lady who's the premier of the province, who literally has scheduled apologies during the week.
I'm gonna actually ask him about my theory, and my theory is she schedules Monday, Wednesday, Friday saying stupid fucking shit, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays are scheduled for the apologies and to claw it back, and then weekends wild card. You don't know if it's going to be good or if it's going to be bad.
Anything. It's not a bad idea to stay at the top of the news cycle, right?
I kind of like it.
Well, it's how Trump did his stuff, and this Danielle Smith is like. I'm not even sorry to say this. She is the dumbest human being I've ever seen.
It's like so much QAnon, and
that's all it is.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? Maybe tomorrow would be a good with Max on. Do you want to play the game tomorrow? The Danielle Smith game we were talking about?
Oh yeah, Danielle Smith or homeless person or
crazy homeless, or like crazy QAnon people who said
crazy QAnon. Yeah.
Or was it Danielle Smith? You want to play that tomorrow?
Danielle Smith or QAnon? Yeah.
Yeah, with Max.
That.
I figure he'd probably
he'll be able to do it.
We'll get that.
You're gonna have to prep that though. You're
it's already.
You're gonna have to get some comments that she made about, like the other day, she made these crazy comments about Ukraine. She's like, I like Russia. And everybody's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Oh, no, that was 6 months ago.
That was 6 months ago. I feel differently today. Like, really? 6 months? That much time?
Yeah.
Good for you. It's quite the
And she felt
agent.
so sorry. She was so sorry for what she said. She was going to direct staff to go talk to people that are Ukrainian, apparently.
She's going to go tell her staff to go talk to some Ukrainians.
To use some Ukrainians, yeah. So that's how sorry she was. So you can tell how sincere that apology was.
Yeah. I've sent my entire staff to Vegreville, home of the world's biggest Easter egg, to go and talk to the Ukrainian community. By the way,
we bought all the pierogies from the church basement last week.
As many as we could.
Yeah.
Because we love Ukraine. She's Ukrainian, I think, by heritage. Did you know her?
She says
her real
is.
name. Do you know it's not
Really?
Danielle Smith? Yeah, we'll tell you what her real name is tomorrow. It's a fascinating story. Yeah. She's got a stage name. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage.
Put your hands together for someone else's premiere.
All right, it's ping pong ball season. Ladies and gentlemen, Danielle Smith. Anyway, it'll be fun. We'll be back tomorrow right here on this free program. 4:00, Max Fawcett, National Observer. He will join us then. Ryan will be back as well. And then we look ahead to Friday. Oh, we've also got Geist on the program tomorrow. Michael Geist, 4:30.
Nice.
Yeah, we got a good group of people. Oh, it's a big show. So we'll see you tomorrow, Ryan. Thanks for doing this.
You got it, man. Take care.
Lynn's Report. Download, subscribe. Ryan Lilley, at Ryan Lilley on Twitter is where you can find him. That's it for us. Have a great day. Thanks, Mark Bourrie, for joining us. Go get his new book. It's called Big Men Fear Me. He's got a ton of titles on there. I think he's got 8. Award-winning author, new book on George McCullagh, the original founder of the Globe and Mail. I fucking love this story, the way he explained it to me. I'm like, I'm all in. I want to read it. It's prescient about the way we are today. So go and get it. Thanks to Mark, Amazon as well. Big Men Fear Me, name of Mark's book. Make sure you get it. Thanks to our friends at Easy Auto Financial for making this possible as well. Go to Easy Auto Financial for more details on how you can get some free financing for a car. Depending on your credit rating, these guys are ninjas. They'll do it all. They do everything. They get you the cheapest rates. You don't have to pay for those financing things either. A lot of people's like, I had to pay for my financing because of my credit. No, these guys don't do any of that. They're your best friend when it comes to buying a car and financing a vehicle. They take care of everything, all the details, turnkey. Go to easyautofinancial.ca for more details. Thanks to guys and girls at and you know, however they identify, at kivlaw.ca, the world's best defense attorneys. You in trouble in Southern Ontario, someone breathing down your neck and you want to get them off your back. Did you do something and you want your freedom back? Go to kivlaw.ca. They'll help you today. Kivlaw defense lawyers are your best bet when it comes to keeping your freedom. And these people I trust implicitly with my legal life, and I would ask that you trust them with yours as well. And I don't trust anybody, so you can guarantee yourself that these guys will help you out. It is called kivlaw.ca. Kivlaw Defense Lawyers. You got a problem, email Robert yourself. He's the principal. All you have to do is send him an email, robert@kivlaw.ca. Again, robert@kivlaw.ca. And, of course, Ed's Fine Imports, his gitch. We wear them. So can you. GITCH3. That's your promo code to get a free pair of luxury boxer briefs. The best Canadian-made underwear you will ever wear. They've got a big pouch in the front for Canadians. You're welcome, says Ed. And he's got a promo code so you can get yourself a free pair right now when you order 3 or more. Tons of colors. GITCH3 is your promo code. Ed's Fine Imports, clothing for men and boys. Check them out online today at www.edsfineimports.com. Have a great day, everybody. Appreciate you being here. Thanks to Mark again. Thanks to Ryan again. Really appreciate you guys being here as well. And Max Fawcett tomorrow. We'll talk about Danielle Smith. We'll talk a little Joe Rogan, and we'll have some fun. See you with Max tomorrow right here around 3, 4 o'clock. Have a great day. See you then. Bye.